The year is 1908, and the largest explosion ever recorded by human beings just occurred in Siberia. The blast was heard hundreds of miles away and shook the very ground beneath people's feet. But what caused it? A meteor? An earthquake? Well, not exactly. In this video, we're going to look at the Tunguska Explosion, find out what really happened, and see how it compares with other cosmic events that have impacted our planet. On June, people all over the world looked up in the sky in awe as they witnessed an incredible natural phenomenon. But these unusual sights were soon forgotten about as everyone went about their business. That is, except for one group of explorers who were just returning from a trip to Siberia. In broad daylight, a bright meteor streaked across the firmament, leaving behind a bright tail of smoke. All of the local villages seemed to be abandoned. Houses were burned down, livestock had been slaughtered, and people had fled in terror. But after searching the area for a few days, they found nothing. In 1927, a Soviet official finally launched an investigation to try and get to the bottom of the case. And considering that meteors are relatively common, you might wonder why this theory was so popular. The reason is because meteors are known to explode when they enter the Earth's atmosphere. Most of these explosions aren't very powerful, but there are instances where they can be quite deadly. They did, however, discover a massive number of dead fish floating in nearby lakes. While it wasn't nearly as destructive as the Tunguska event, it was the first time in history that civilians managed to film an airburst meteor. This isn't possible unless the meteor was made of pure iron, which is unlikely. When an earthquake occurs, a large amount of energy is released in the form of seismic waves. These waves travel through the planet's crust and can sometimes cause tremendous damage. In 1985, a 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck near the city of Spitak. The quake was so violent that it caused hundreds of houses to explode. The footage shows a bright flash of light followed by a loud explosion, which was actually heard thousands of miles away. Instead, the force of the earthquake was strong enough to cause the Earth itself to explode. The Spitak earthquake was nowhere near as powerful as the Valdivia earthquake. So could an earthquake of that magnitude have caused the Tunguska explosion? You see, Siberia is full of gas fields, and it's entirely possible that a leak could have occurred before the explosion. Even people in Canada reported feeling the tremors of this earthquake, which begs the question, could an earthquake have caused the Tunguska explosion? Underground pockets of gas can sometimes ignite due to a combination of heat, friction, and electrical sparks. In 1982, for example, a gas leak in the Soviet Union resulted in 630 people being killed. The leak ignited and leveled 17 apartment blocks. The Tunguska explosion remains a mystery to this day, and we may never know exactly what caused it. It's entirely possible that this kind of explosion could have caused the devastation at Tunguska. But aside from that, there was no sign of a crater or any other impact damage. Well, actually, that's another piece of evidence against the meteor theory. Thankfully, most of these space rocks don't cause a lot of damage, and occasionally they're even helpful. For this theory to hold water, essentially the top layer of the Earth would have had to explode upwards instead of outwards. However, things could have turned out differently had the event occurred just a few hours earlier. Had it taken place just a few hours later, when people were outside working in the fields, the death toll could have been enormous. You see, if the Tunguska event was caused by a meteor, then there should have been pieces of it strewn across the landscape. After all, it's not every day that a dragon attacks a Siberian village. Or check out scientists terrify world leaders with this planet-destroying asteroid. Earthquakes occur when two tectonic plates collide. In order for an earthquake to occur, one plate would need to move downwards while the other moves upwards. This debris often contains minerals that help plants grow, meaning that a meteor shower is actually a good thing for farmers. But in the case of the Tunguska explosion, there was no evidence of an earthquake. People had seen meteors light up the night sky before and would do so again in the future. For example, a meteor that exploded over Egypt in 1912 showered the ground below with barium-coated dust. The dust eventually made its way into the Nile River, poisoning many people and killing thousands of livestock. Had the explosion been caused by an earthquake, there would have been much more evidence of heavy machinery being used to survey the area afterwards. But despite the fact that it was able to destroy solid rock, the Sikhote Allen meteorite only weighed about 60 tons. This begs the question, how heavy was the meteor that caused the Tunguska explosion? One example is the Sikhote Allen meteorite, which exploded over Russia in 1947. Unlike the meteorites that usually burn up in the atmosphere, this space rock actually managed to make it to the ground. So no one gave much thought to the passing comet until something strange started happening near the end of July. Others blamed a vicious dragon or a giant angered by human activity. Whatever the cause, though, people were too afraid to stay in the area, and so they had packed up and left. The sighting of this celestial spectacle was so significant that several major newspapers around the world covered the event. However, while the appearance of this space rock was impressive, it wasn't actually all that unusual. Some people living in Japan began reporting strange atmospheric phenomena, including bright flashes of light in the sky, red auroras, and even bizarre clouds. As they were making their way back home, they noticed that something was wrong. When the travelers asked the locals what had happened, they were told a terrifying story. Approximately 3 weeks ago, there had been an enormous explosion that shook the ground like an earthquake. Windows had shattered miles away and cattle had been flung into the air and killed. But no one knew what had caused the disaster. Most people assumed that it was some kind of meteorite, but that didn't make sense since no meteorite had been seen. The explorers felt that something was amiss. If it was a meteor that caused this destruction, then surely its impact site would still be smoldering. As the years passed, the mystery of the Tunguska event continued to baffle scientists. Initially, the officials believed that the explosion had been caused by a meteor. One such instance was the Chelyabinsk meteor that exploded over Russia in 2013. While the Chelyabinsk meteor was relatively small, other space rocks have proven to be much more dangerous. Upon impact, it left a massive crater that was 213 feet wide and 76 feet deep. Well, considering the amount of devastation it caused, it must have been pretty big, right? But after thoroughly searching the area, scientists only managed to find a few small pebbles. It's as if the space rock completely evaporated upon impact. This brings us to another popular theory, the earthquake theory. The most powerful earthquake in recorded history was the Valdivia earthquake of 1960. Its magnitude was so great that it could be felt all the way in North America. Well, possibly. There is evidence that earthquakes can cause airbursts, especially in areas with loose soil. In fact, buildings weren't even the main casualty. Possibly. However, it would have had to be much closer to the surface than most earthquakes. However, this poses another problem. There were no reports of the land shaking beforehand, and the trees in the area were blown over rather than snapped. This leaves us with a rather peculiar theory, the gas leak theory. Now, we know what you're thinking. How could a gas leak cause such a massive explosion? Well, let us explain. Once the fire starts, it can spread throughout the gas field, causing massive explosions that can literally level entire cities. Now imagine if this disaster had occurred underground, and the explosion blasted upwards rather than outwards. But there is one major problem with this theory. Scientists have never been able to detect the presence of gas in the area. However, it is safe to say that the true cause was probably somewhere between a meteorite and a gas leak. Now, while it would be nice to know exactly what happened, there is some comfort in knowing that the Tunguska explosion was likely a once-in-a-lifetime event. It's estimated that approximately every 3,000 years or so, the Earth's atmosphere is hit by a space rock that causes an airburst. For example, meteor showers happen when the Earth passes through a path of debris left behind by a comet. Other times, space rocks can contain compounds that actually harm people. Tunguska was certainly lucky that the explosion didn't cause any casualties. You see, in 1908, people were just finishing up their breakfast when the explosion occurred. And while it's nice to think of Tunguska as a close call, it's comforting to know that such an event is extremely unlikely to happen twice. Now watch. Why did the Russian meteor happen now?